This is Greg Gallis on Green Gregs and Galactic Gregs. I'm doing a joint program today for both of my YouTube channels. For Galactic Gregs, because I've been doing power grid defense videos on Galactic Gregs since I started my channel. Pretty close to since I started it, because I have actually chaired 2 power grid defense conferences. And power grid defense is a key topic if you're interested in saving the power in grid, if you're interested in prepping. But it's also an important topic for space. So much so that my local chapter of the National Space Society, the Huntsville, Alabama L5 Society, which I founded in 1983, by the way, sponsored 2 power grid defense conferences, and that's how we ran them. But why would space be interested in power grid defense? Simply because if you don't have a power grid, you don't have a future. If our power grid goes down, the risk of what can happen is so severe that we just may not come back. We've got to get our grid secured. And for that reason, I'm bringing on David Womack. David is here producing a video, The Dark Sky Event. And his video is a documentary. And he's going to set up a website that's going to have more in-depth stuff on it, more in-depth interviews and things that you can do to take action yourself to help get this grid secured. We're not here just talking about it. The one thing I do on my channels is talk about, especially on Green Gregs, is things you need to be aware of in case things happen. But I also try to be more proactive to say, let's keep it from happening. The best prepping thing that you can do is prevent the problem in the first place. And so that's our objective here. But if we fail to prevent it, you're going to have to be prepared. So I cover that I'm covering this for both channels today. And what we'll do here is we'll go quickly into, David, tell us a little bit about yourself. Just tell us who you are, and we'll do the, we'll show the trailer here in a minute. So
okay.
David, tell us a little bit about yourself. And tell us why you're doing this promo, why you're doing this documentary.
Well, I'll tell you, I got interested in grid security and everything and preparing back after I read 1 Second After, and realized that securing the grid was something we needed to do in this country, and what the consequences would be if we didn't. And then so in 2017, after they closed down the first EMP commission, I was moved by Dr. Peter Pry and Hank Cooper, who came on and kind of made a call for people to come out and support them in grassroots movements to get Congress and the government's attention and the power industry's attention about the problem that we face with the grid. And so I thought, hey, what can I do? I've been a film producer for 30 years and have made a couple of different documentaries. And so I decided to make a documentary about the power grid and the threats we face and what we can do to move forward in a resilient way.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the trailer. Last guy.
We assume tomorrow is going to be like yesterday was, and that our civilization will go on forever. We should learn from history that civilization doesn't go on forever. Sometimes it ends, and ends catastrophically.
We have built Western civilization on the electron and on electricity without the strategic design of resilience built in. It was just given that our electric grid, that would be safe. That is no longer.
Our adversaries are planning to use the electromagnetic spectrum as a warfighting domain.
Every hostile power on the planet understands America's vulnerabilities.
The world is in much more dangerous shape now than it was during the Cold War.
Even if none of the enemies act on those plans, there will be a coronal mass ejection capable of destroying the electric grid as we know it.
The life skills that we need to survive without electricity, they're gone.
The entire country was a disaster.
You are on your own. The cavalry is not coming.
10, 20, 30% of the population is wise, ready, and smart. They can save the rest. We know how to protect against it. I just worry if we have enough time. We're running out of time.
Excellent, excellent, David.
Thank you.
So that's the trailer one. This will be. How long will the documentary be that you're going to release initially?
It's a feature-length documentary, so 90 to 120 minutes. Right now, we're in post-production, and we did 35 interviews from leading experts across the country. So
that includes me, by the way, right?
that includes you, and I got a story to tell about you. You were awesome. So our first forte into interviewing people, we came over to the grid security conference you had in Huntsville, and I think you were the first person I talked to, Greg, because I was like, "Hey, Greg, can we come over?" And you're like, "Sure, come on over." And you guys were really nice. And we came over and met Dr. Pry and some of the other people there, and Tommy Waller from the Grid Coalition, and Michael Mabey, and some of the great folks that are involved in this cause. And that was really our step off point for the documentary. And so I really appreciate you and your folks over there. You've done a great job.
All right. Well, thank you. A lot of people, even though I talk about this on my channel, they don't realize how involved I am. I'm a participant in Tommy Waller's Secure the Grid teleconference.
Yeah. Weekly
he
call.
every week. I'm a member of InfoGuard, and I have had Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. I've had Mike Mabey, who you've shown in your trailer there, and on this channel, along with Ambassador Hank Cooper. I've had General Ken Krosniak. A lot of the good heavy hitters from our community have been on my channel, and I'm going to bring them back, and probably Tommy Waller and a few others. And I've also had another individual producing a documentary who's in the same venue. There are various levels for different distances. Some are 350,000, 450,000. There's various different gradations on these transformers. But these things are as big as a house. They weigh 200 tons. There's only like 11 of the Slapmall type cars that move around in the country. There's just a few, just a handful.
Absolutely. And they're made all over the world. They're made in South Korea and Germany. And really, one of the interesting things we found out recently, well, about a year ago, was that China manufactures some of these too. And I didn't realize they manufacture some of the large transformers, but they actually do. They've got a lot of other components in the grid. But about a year ago, they pulled one of these large transformers out and took it to a military base, and actually did find some back doors built into it. So that transformer never made it to the grid. And that's why you see a lot of the stuff about China now, and backdoors, and Huawei and the other companies, and concerns about technology, because that's what they do. They steal stuff, cyber, and put in backdoors to our grid.
That is why President Trump ruled that we cannot have Chinese-made components in our power grid, these major.
Absolutely.
Because they found that backdoor electronic device that would report back to China, and it was basically like a cell phone built in.
Yep.
And it would just report back, and it probably also gave them the ability to shut the thing down.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was
that transformer.
It was an internal means for them to shut a grid down. In fact, that they would even send us something like that tells you what their intent is. People, China's not going to do this. The heck, they've already are putting components out. They've already been hacking our grid. Trial run type hacks. They have the EMP superweapon technology. What a lot of people don't understand, the EMP superweapon, this was declassified in 2008 because Dr. William Graham, who was the foremost expert in the United States on the EMP, and it's been
head of the EMP Commission, yeah.
Yeah, he's head of the EMP Commission, and spent a stint even as the administrator of NASA. Dr. William Graham testified to Congress what the Soviet generals told him. And he said in congressional record, we thought it was classified, we found this, that the EMP superweapons come out 200,000 volts per meter on the lines and wires. That is 4 times higher than the 50,000 volts per meter mil-spec for hardening, which we thought was good enough based on the Starfish Prime. I'm a space guy. It's hard for me to say Starfish, but it's Starship.
Yeah, and I mean they really
Prime experiment.
Yeah.
That what we found from that was set a lot of our standards, and those are just not adequate for the weapons that are designed to maximize the gamma rays they put out. For those that don't understand, an EMP comes from the gamma rays put out by a nuclear weapon, and the smaller ones are better because they don't have all the shielding on those,
correct,
less general radiation, and so they put out a maximum pulse of gamma rays. The gamma rays strip electrons from the atoms in the atmosphere and produce an actual electrical wave traveling through the atmosphere, multi-frequency spans that can fry smaller devices and larger devices too. So you get the E1, E2, and E3 components of your EMP from a nuclear EMP event. And
yeah, of all the threats that we feature in the film, CME from the sun, cyber attack, a physical attack, and EMP is the one that we probably have no great answers for, and we would never come back from. And the power industry doesn't want to deal with any of them, but they really don't want to deal with EMP because I just feel like they have no good answer for it, really. I mean, it would just fry so many of the components, not only the chips and everything and all their control systems that aren't hardened, which are very few. A few power companies now have gone in and hardened some of their control areas, control rooms and stuff. But, you have all these SCADA boxes in everything all over the grid, and they don't have thousands of backups sitting there for them, just like they don't have backups for those large transformers that are pretty much irreplaceable. It takes a year and a half just to get one of them. So
it takes a year and a half to get it on the loading dock after you order it.
And that's if you have gas and communications, and if you even have somebody to go move it, like there's going to be anybody there after a month to go in and move that, that's actually still working for the power plant.
You have a bank account to pay for it. You have to have the internet to order it over. You got to have some way to task the people that's going to move it. The year and a half when it comes here, how many gas stations are going to be operating with no grid? How many trucks are going to be able to roll? Will you be able to get spare parts? Nothing will be working. And they estimate that 9 out of 10 of our population will be dead in a year. So you're talking 6 months after 9 out of 10 people, including a lot of your qualified technicians that would be available to install stuff like this. It takes a huge network of people to do these kind of things. And I think it's like Humpty Dumpty. Once Humpty Dumpty falls, all the king's horses and all the king's men just aren't going to be able to put them together again.
And we interviewed for the documentary, we interviewed Jim Robb, the president and CEO of NERC, and NERC makes all the standards, for the grid, how the grid runs and everything. And that was an interesting interview. It was enlightening to see how little some people that are really high up know and understand the threats. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this, because there's a lot of people in government and otherwise in the military and everything, that really don't understand the threats that we face, and they put them off in this corner as low probability. But if you take all the threats together, the probability goes up. I mean, just from a CME, a coronal mass ejection from the sun, there's a 50% chance in my children and grandchildren's lifetime that'll happen. I think it's like 12% every 10 years is, I believe, what NASA said.
Well, and bear in mind, Dave, let me bring you up to speed on that.
Okay.
That's the probability you get a Carrington scale event.
Yeah, a Carrington scale event. Yeah, we have other ones.
No, hang on with it. It's worse than that, because the Earth's magnetic sphere is
right.
dropping in field strength rapidly. Our shields are dropping, which means a smaller CME
could have a bigger effect.
It might be, the railroad event in 1921 would probably take our grid down today, and it might not be long until something like that took down the Quebec grid back in 1989 could do the same thing. And we had a near miss in 2012, by the way.
2012, yeah.
Very, very close near miss of a Carrington scale event.
Yeah.
Now, some people, that was it. No, the probability is the probability that we hit Earth. The sun shoots these out in different directions over time. that's a probability that one's actually going to hit Earth. So
yeah, absolutely. And we went out to the Space Weather Center where they monitor the sun 24/7. And we interviewed the assistant director there, and it's amazing. I mean, and you know, people don't really think that's real, and that's the problem with a lot of this. They see it in movies and stuff, and they kind of see it science fiction, or they kind of think it's science fiction, and because that's the way it's almost presented in a lot of movies. But you know, it's a real problem, and people need to understand that it's real. And this is one of the problems, you know, again, if we not only Mother Nature from the sun, but if our enemies know about this vulnerability, it's our Achilles heel. And the first time we go into a shooting war with anybody, Russia, China, are already in our grid, they're going to take our grid down because they're going to want to pull us back from the Pacific or from Europe or wherever suits them. And Iran and North Korea, their proxies are also coming up in the world and getting more capabilities.
All right, it's a fact that we know that's in the military written doctrine.
Yep.
Iran, of North Korea, China, and Russia to do just that. That is in
absolutely
the doctrine. It's what they teach their people, and it's what they say they're going to do. They've even said, you know, that's what they would do. So there's, you know, this idea that some kind of surprise is mind-boggling.
Well, the idea that we're not prepared for it is mind-boggling.
That is the thing. But like you said, the problem is a lot of people, even the high-ups, don't really appreciate the gravity of it. And
they don't understand.
And there's so many people, well, they got it covered over here, or these guys got this over there.
That's right. DOE's got it. DHS has got it. The military's got it. And none of them have got it.
The buck stops over there.
Right.
Nobody's got it. That's what we found out and determined. And nobody can show you. I've heard people say, oh, well, the National Guards all have the plans. They got the doctrine.
They have no plan.
Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Well, go ask the adjutant general or of the state who's in charge of the National Guard. Go ask the EMA director of the state. I have talked to both in Alabama. They go, what? No, we don't have it. But I've had even
there is no
Sergeant
plan.
Major say, oh, yeah, we got it. This blah, blah, blah. No, you don't. You don't have it. So go ask the guys who are in charge of all this in any state, and they'll all tell you the same thing. Nope, we don't have it. The state that's closest right now to getting the job done is, well, the states are North and South Carolina, thanks to our friend Hank Cooper.
Hank Cooper
has been at the forefront. I've got him on my channel, and believe it or not, that video is about one of the least performing videos. I don't know how people think, oh, Ambassador, he's not real. No,
he's a brilliant man.
He's a brilliant man.
Smart guy, super nice. We interviewed him and talked about his project over on Lake Norman with Duke Power. And it's an amazing project. And another amazing project is going on in Austin. San Antonio, Texas, where they are actually securing the grid in San Antonio. It's a partnership between the city, the military, and the power company, which is one of the huge problems is you can never get those three people to agree on anything. But here it's an unusual case because the city actually owns the power company and there's 10 military bases there. So everybody's interests are tied close enough so that they've decided to harden the grid in San Antonio. And we went out and covered that in one of their meetings. So we talk about that in the documentary, but that's real interesting. And they actually just got some funding from DHS and some other people. That's one of the things that came out from the EMP executive order that President Trump issued, was that they would get some funding for that. And they actually won some of that funding. So we're excited about that because hopefully that'll provide a blueprint for other cities that want to do it. And
that is something that we can help with here.
Yeah.
People on this channel can get involved in.
Absolutely.
Writing letters and doing the things that I talk about that a lot. Do
yes.
that. And by the way, the two of the individuals who were key at spearheading that was General Stephen Quast,
yes,
Major Stuckenmeyer, and you showed them both in your trailer. I saw them.
They were both fantastic interviews, and I'll tell you a funny story. So, as a matter of fact, it was right after General Quast formed the Electronic Defense Task Force, and I met some people at the grid meeting in Huntsville the first time. It was 2 years ago, August. And in September, they had a meeting at a secret level with EDTF where they brought in 200 experts from all over the world, military experts, power experts, grid experts. And it was about, problems with the EMS spectrum, electromagnetic spectrum in particular, not just EMP, excuse me, not just EMP and stuff. But so we went to that conference, and we weren't really approved to be at that conference, but we were kind of on the outlying. They had a little press junket, and we actually got approved to go into that. But so I didn't get to interview General Quast or Major Stuckenberg at that one. But then when they had the next EDTF, they had made it so that there was a track for 200 people who didn't have clearance and 200 who did have clearance. And so I actually got to go through the track, and it was fascinating to see the scenarios that, you know, the military thought might happen, and to sit around and hear the opinions of power company executives and other people who are experts in the grid talk about the problems openly. And it was an eye-opener. And General Quast, I actually did get to hunt him and David down there, and I finally got approval from the Air Force Public Affairs people they weren't following me around at this one. Last one, they were I think they had a tail on me. This one, I finally got approval, or they got approval from them to interview. So we got, a uniform interview from him. And it was amazing because, you know, he's not with the Air Force anymore. And he retired, and which is a whole nother story.
He should have been the head of the Space Command.
He should have been head of the Space Force. He's a brilliant man, a brilliant communicator, and I feel like they missed a great opportunity there.
Yes, absolutely. All right, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to share in a minute why people should really be so concerned about this beyond transformers. Now, actually, these transformers we talked about can be secured. They're the hardest things to we have the technology through putting surge blockers in the center tap, basically.
Well, they have one out, and they have a functioning one out in Idaho. Yeah,
we can harden those. The SCADAs, you can put a lot of those in Faraday cages, and you can use mill standards for some of the boxes. But the best thing is those are easier to replace on those transformers. Yeah, there's lots of them, but we can at least get certain critical parts of the grid running, and most importantly, we've got to keep the water flowing to the cooling pools of the nuclear power plants. I'm about to show everybody why, but before I do that,
absolutely,
I'll tell everyone, hey, I do a lot of the videos, especially on Green Gregs, about power grid defense and other things that you need to be aware of. So that the proposition of the Green Gregs channel is to help you survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. Now, the Galactic Grid channel is more about, you know, technology in the future, but you're not going to get there if the grid goes down. So this is something that has a cross interest, I should say. I don't think I get the share button. I started to open something. So before I do that, let me go here. I'm going to show people what we need to consider, though. In case it goes down, you need to know that you've got to be ready because right now, we're not getting this done, and we're in a political crux right now worldwide. There are things that could bring our grid down in just a few months, and we're not going to be able to have it ready. So in the meantime, you need to get your stuff ready just in case. So what I'm going to tell you is that you need to be prepared. Prepping is important for everyone, and in order to be aware of that, I can get this thing maximized. Give me a second. I have a special deal through prepwithgreg.com where you can get a 4-week food supply for one person, 2,000 calories per day for $100 off. You can save a third on the cost. This is 25-year storage food for only $197 for a month's supply of food for one person. That is a deal. It's 2,000 calories per day, 284 servings. It's got breakfast, lunch, dinner. And you can see it comes in these nice handy carry buckets. So it's just hard to beat this. For long-term food storage, this is an awesome deal. It even has desserts and drinks, as you can see down here. So this is something that can definitely keep you in a good mood while you're living in your bunker or can't get out and about or whatever the case is that you've got to prep for. But it's just something you need to have in mind. And you better get them while the getting's good because we're going to have food prices going up real soon. So I don't know how long this deal is going to last. Is the sources of the food are going up. I see soybeans are going up right now, and a lot of other things. We've had the drench coat knock the crops out in Iowa, and we've got China is going to be buying everything they can because their crops have been devastated by floods and locusts, and good gracious, they're having all kind of environmental problems over there. So you need to get ready for that. And I'm going to show you a PowerPoint presentation. We'll do another share here real quick. Let me find the right thing here. Give me a second. There we are. All right. Now, what we're looking at here is the magnitude of the threat. And this data is about 4 years old. At the time that I made this chart, we had over 74,000 metric tons of spent fuel rods sitting in the cooling pools at the nuclear power plants. Now, if you figured the warheads of Russia and America and what else around the world, and you assume there's 40 pounds of nuclear material for each warhead, then you would come out with saying that the radioactive equivalent of this is something like 280 full-scale nuclear wars. Just radioactive material sitting in these spent fuel rod pools, waiting on the lights to go out to go up and smoke. Oh, now, Greg, they're not going to go up and smoke. Oh, wait, just let me show you. Can it possibly happen? You know, we got a lot of stuff in there. I am going to skip ahead a little bit to some other charts. While I'm skipping ahead, I might hit on a couple of things. Here are those transformers. I will get down to another chart, and I'll blow this up full screen in a little bit. These are those large transformers I was talking about. They're huge. Their coils are hand wound. You know, they're hard to move. You can see it on a utility boat here. Here's one of those rail cars, special built rail cars for them. That's a smaller one, by the way. This is the kind you move on a truck. Look what kind of truck platform you're going to have if you're going to move it by truck. Maybe I should blow this up, but I'm really aiming to get down to another part of my presentation right here. Now I'm going to blow it up. We'll go full scale here. Bam. So we have in the United States a lot of nuclear power plants. Now, this is Browns Ferry. This one's about 26 miles from me. And this is their fresh brown. This is when they were building their boiling water reactor here. And we had a storm back in 2011 that nearly knocked us out. This is one of the cooling pools. The cooling pools are 20 foot deep in water, but the water evaporates at 160 gallons a minute. The roof over these are not in containment buildings. The roof is a sheet metal roof. So they have the fuel pellets and they're assembled into rods and they're coated in zircaloy. Now this is the area right here. See, this is where the reactor would be, this ginormous containment building, so if something goes wrong, like everything's contained. But the rods are stored, the spent fuel rods, in just a regular building with a sheet metal roof over it. So you don't have the same level of protection when these catch on fire. You know, this is showing you what the roof looked like in some of these buildings in Fukushima when things got bad. Of course, you know, they blew up, essentially, some of those did. This shows you where these plants are located. And this is another depiction of these plants with some of the keep out zones. And this shows you that the rate at which we're producing the spent fuel, this is no chart that ended in 2015. And they were wondering where the heck were we going to put it all when they were making this chart. Well, that's 5 years ago. Here's what's vulnerable. It's these generators. These generators can also be taken down. This is what is backed up to provide the cooling water should the grid go down. Now, a lot of people don't understand that a nuclear power plant doesn't produce the fuel, the power it needs to run itself. You can't, the load balancing just won't work. There's several other reasons that don't happen, and they didn't really think they were going to have to. In fact, you have to have something like a coal-fired plant or something else to start a nuclear power plant. Yeah, we don't get into all that. So the operative thing here is that I have charts on this. I guess it's in another presentation, but I do have charts that show what happens when, let me stop this share. And we're going to, let's see here, I got, all right, David, there we are. Now we're back in gallery view. That's what I want to do. Pardon me, viewers.
I lost you for a second. That's okay.
Yeah, it wasn't switching over to the Google. I'm not Google. The Zoom got hung up.
Yeah.
Usually when I stop a share, it snaps right back into whichever view format I got it set up for. And I got it set up where it should just be showing the individual, like myself right now is running his mouth. All right, so I have set it up where you see both people saying at the same time all the time. That gets kind of boring, and sometimes we like to take a sip of coffee when we're not running our mouth.
That's all right. Definitely.
So, these fuel rods will burn on contact with air. I've got another presentation. I'll have to dig it up. I thought it was in that presentation where I've got pictures where the Sandia National Laboratories did the experiments where they actually they caught on fire, and they caught on fire a lot easier than I thought they would.
Right.
They are enriched. These fuel rods, when they're reactor, they're enriched in hydrogen and other things. So when they get contact with oxygen, these fuel rods they absolutely will burn.
Right.
Question. They've already tested. I've had people, even they work in nuclear power plants, told me, "Oh, this won't happen. Ah, that won't happen. It won't happen. I got some of this stuff sitting on my bookshelf." Yeah, but it's not what's been in the reactor. And yeah,
Right.
This is akin to the zirconium that a lot of ladies are wearing on their fingers, but this is zircaloy, alloy of zirconium. The reason they use that is that steel and a lot of your other metals won't hold up to all the radiation, so they had to find something that could hold these rods together. But they will not. You've got to keep them covered in water. And when they built the grid, they didn't imagine the whole grid going down when they built these plants. They didn't.
Well, no.
It wasn't in their mind. So this is the issue, David. It's how do we deal with that, and how do you deal with keeping that water flowing to them when all your infrastructure is shattered? And
Right.
What we got to have the adjutant generals and the National Guard working on, and they've told me they don't have the plan for that. Even though
They have no plan, just like they have no plan for the whole country in a national disaster. I mean, the NIAC report that came out, I believe, about a year ago or a year and a half ago, even.
Well, I lost you there. I don't know what happened there. So maybe David will be back with us in a minute. He's must be having an internet problem. He's froze. So I hope we'll get him back. That happens sometimes. We have glitches. But what's happened is we have a grid in this country that's not secure. The companies don't want to secure it. Some of us are fighting to get it secure, and we're meeting resistance at every step of the way. But a lot of the people resisting us don't fully understand the problems and issues. And quite often the industry teams like the EFRI and some of these organizations that are out there hire business majors and politicians to, I think, oh, we lost him completely. So maybe he'll join back in a minute. We've lost David. He's not a participant now. He must have had internet down. So what we have to know is they are not doing what they need to do from their end to make sure that we're safe. They have not taken care of us. I'm just hoping I'm watching, see if he'll come in for a minute. We have to push for it. There are two organizations, the National Electric Reliability Corporation, which is an industry group, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Here he comes.
Hello.
There you are. I was starting to explain NERC and FERC. I lost you, so I should continue.
That's okay.
I should probably at least continue on NERC and FERC.
Yeah, go ahead.
So they're set up such that it's crazy, but the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is set up such that they don't propose the regulations. They are set up to take the proposals from the industry group, NERC.
Self-regulating.
Regulatory Commission. So it's like the fox runs the hen house. He don't watch it, he runs it. It is a very bad, incestuous relationship between the regulator and the regulatee. In fact, it runs backwards. It's the other way around. And then you get organizations such as EFRI that's out there running defense for them, that does everything they can to stymie what our engineers and scientists are putting out there. We have engineers and scientists, physicists who understand this, people who've run tests, tested components, and seen what this stuff does from the EMP Commission and so forth. But then you get somebody who's a history major or a politician or something else, and they get over, they put together a report because all this is not a problem. Well, they're full of bogus whatever.
Right. I mean, they just, I mean, it's self-regulatory and NERC is made up, 85% of the voting members are from the electric industry. So, it's a very self-serving organization, and when they make regulations, they have a track record of making regulations that are the lowest standard that they can put out. And they say that people will, that the companies go up and above and beyond that. But the interesting thing about that is we interviewed a gentleman from a company who power companies hire to test. It's a red team, and they go in and test and break into substations. This is more getting back into the physical attack part of it and cyber. And using tools and everything from Amazon, only tools from Amazon, he told us how they were able to break into every substation that they were hired to break into with no problem at all. And I said, well, what about the SIP standards from NERC? And he said, well, once they get the minimum standards done, they just check it off the box and they're done. So it wasn't at all.
All right, help me out here. Are you talking about cyber break-ins, or are you talking physical?
Well, they have a team that actually does break-ins into physical, like into substations. So years ago after Metcalf, FERC and NERC came up with standards, SIP standards, because you got to understand, in those substations, there's also housing that is like Ethernet hubs, because it's all controlled by internet. So if you break into there, you also have some cyber access to the grid itself, because it is a smart grid. So they were able to break into all the ones they were hired to break into. And again, when I interviewed Jim Robb, it was like, well, they never just do the minimums, but that's not true. That's exactly what they do. I mean, he talked to the people who were actually doing it, and the managers, and they just check the box off that it's done, and then they move on. Not all of them, but the majority of them do. So even physical threat is still a bigger threat, and with drones now, it's an even bigger threat, because if you look at what the Iranians did in Saudi Arabia, attacking Aramco over there, and other attacks, and so physical attacks are part of it. But what they would probably do is a combined attack anyway: cyber, physical, everything. EMP. They view EMP as a cyber weapon, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. They don't look at it as a nuclear weapon.
No.
They actually claim it's a cyber weapon, even
right.
though it's off by a nuke.
Right.
To them, that's not nuclear war, because they're not,
that's right,
on your head. But the long-term effect is worse. I mean,
that's right.
One low-grade weapon, just like the optimum size, is the kind of weapons been developed in North Korea. A lot of people don't realize that.
Right.
It's stuff North Korea's developed. But you could also, those are small. If you put them on satellites, you could do fractional orbital bombardment. You could have one on a satellite, just fly overhead, and then the day you decide to set it off, boom.
Well, there's 2 of those going overhead right now from North Korea every day. I mean, there are 2 satellites that they put up in the same orbit that was used and developed by the Russians for their fractal
bombardment.
Orbital bombardment. Ugh, that's a lot. So they developed the satellites, and the reason they come from the south is because all of our missile defenses are in the north, in Alaska and Canada and everywhere else. We have nothing to protect us from the south. So before at least, they couldn't really shoot them down. Now, maybe, but we don't really still know what's in those satellites. There's no way to know. They could just be going overhead, and you would have no warning of an EMP.
That's all too true. All too true. Now, a lot of people don't realize too is that we have other vulnerabilities. Like the North Koreans had a cargo ship, what they called a tramp steamer, that called the Chong Gang,
right,
around in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean.
Yep.
And it was caught coming back through the Panama Canal after it had already been out here running around. They got in a hurry to get it back for some reason, so they thought they had a chance getting it through the canal. And they did an inspection on this ship. Buried under a lot of sugar in a cargo hold, they found 2 fully erect missile launchers. The missiles were on the launchers. Everything was set up underneath all that sugar. Those things could have been sitting on the deck of that boat in some kind of practice trial runs, and we just didn't know it. And this happened at the same time, roughly. This ship was in that area at the same time. One of those satellites first went over America, and it was when, and that was the same day that the Metcalf attack took place. It's
2014.
Really it's really believed that they would do a multi-pronged attack if they come at us. That there would be, cyber, physical, many other, missile, maybe satellite. And a lot of people are thinking intercontinental ballistic missile, but it could be an interim range ballistic missile.
Well, yeah, and the reason that's attractive to them is because, I mean, they call it a scud and a tub, because they could take a lot lower power missile. It doesn't have to be an intercontinental ballistic missile. And the Russians actually developed technology that these things sit in a transfer truck container truck. So when you see all these ships coming into all these ports with all these containers on them, they have full systems that the Russians have been selling for 15 years all over the world, that they just pop up out of the back of it and they could fire a missile. And then you don't really know, there's no retaliation, because you don't know what country fired it from. What country fired it? It came from the Gulf or the middle of the Atlantic, or it's not attributable to the Russians or the Chinese or anybody. So it would be a lot harder for them to do a counterattack. Exactly. And one of the scenarios, I mean, a lot of people like EPRI and they put this one little dot over the middle of the country, and then they say that that an EMP wouldn't take down certain things because of the field of the EMP. Well, an adversary that's going to attack us, especially with a scud and a tub type scenario, would send up probably 4 or 5 EMPs. And, they wouldn't have to go as high if they sent up 4 and 5 too. And, if they took down the East Coast pretty much, I mean, I think 2/3 of the population is on the East Coast, I believe. And so it would, there are a lot of scenarios, and if they hit us, it'll be something we're not expecting too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But think about this. If you go south of our country, where we've got our vulnerable underbelly that we're not monitoring, there is a nation that's failed nation. It's called Venezuela.
Venezuela.
Failed nation. Anything can be going on in and around Venezuela, because that's, pretty much unregulated. But who's playing in Venezuela? We have Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. They're all there in Venezuela.
They just stopped a ship last week, I believe it was, an Iranian ship that was transferring gas last week from Venezuela.
So if somebody went to Venezuela and did a launch offshore from a scud in a tub, you wouldn't know who it came from. So there's a plausible deniability. How do you attack, a country when you don't know who it is, who it was? It might not even have been a country.
Absolutely.
So, some terrorist group, it's said that there's 80 loose backpack nukes. Who knows what came out of the Soviet Union when they were falling apart. The hard part from the build is the triggering devices. But we know that even though Iran claims they don't have enough uranium enriched yet to make a weapon, we know that they have the ability to do the triggers. And they also trade with North Korea, who has the materials. And I have heard a long time ago that when Kazakhstan fell, that Iran actually got 2 full-scale ICBMs with the warheads. So what they actually have is a good question.
Well, and they share technology too. I mean, if you go to the launches in North Korea, there were always Iranians there, and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, Al-Qaeda Khan was the father of the Pakistan.
Yep.
And Al-Qaeda Khan actually was selling this stuff all over the Mideast and elsewhere, the technology systems. He was making a lot of money with that. And including, Libya started the system, but when we started hitting other countries, Muammar Gaddafi got scared and he shut us down. He still got taken out, even though he shut his stuff down. So it didn't do him any good. That might have been a lesson to the other guys. Hey, we don't want to shut down. We saw it happen to Muammar Gaddafi. You get whacked, you know, so why do we want to stop producing this stuff?
Right.
Now, some people go, yeah, well, it takes a major power to attack or do something like it. I'm going to show people something that
It doesn't.
Yeah. I'm going to give them a little perspective of something I was doing 20 years ago. So I hope this don't, I'm going to go into full screen mode here again. I hope it don't cause us the issue it did earlier.
And where are you in there? I don't see
I
you.
am right here. That is me.
Hey, where's your beard and your hair?
Didn't have all that back then. This is a more recent phenomenon with me. And this is just in a garage workshop building. Here's a hybrid fuel grain is in here. Here's a nozzle. And we were measuring out the fins. This is a garage workshop, basically.
Wow.
This is a small team of guys working late night toward midnight, you know, building a rocket. This was our electronics shop that we had in another garage. This was one of our rockets on actually the Pearl River barge in the Gulf of Mexico. Now this was a club rocket. This was the Halo SL2 rocket. By the way, that rocket hangs today in Huntsville in a place called the Straight to L Brewery from the ceiling. This was a balloon that we had developed. Now you can put these devices on balloons that get up 20 miles high, and they will cover about an area with a radius of, you could cover a diameter of 800 miles from a balloon with an EMP. This was our balloon launch return vehicle. We were developing rocket-powered UAVs. And you can see the center, we launched one of those from a boat. And this was launched from a boat called the C. Michael Calais, which I rented from a company down operating out of Houma, Louisiana, a utility boat. And there it is. And that little tuft of blonde hair where my cursor at, that's me right there. That's our balloon launch return vehicle. And this was Mike Smith, the head of what with them was, it's now Aerostar.
What altitude would those rockets go to?
Well, we got in the Guinness Book World Records when we launched from the shore. You could hit the common line. You can hit space with rockets like that.
Wow.
This was our cheap access to space rocket. This one was 17.5 foot long. A rocket like this could go 100 miles up, so you could definitely get enough altitude with a device like that. And this is on the back of a utility boat known as the Mr. Offshore. I don't believe that boat is operational today. This was in the year 2000. This is what I was doing 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I could hit the edge of space from operating out of 2 garages, something that took a superpower to do just a handful of decades earlier. We built devices and electronics back then with the old stuff that we had 20 years ago that could defeat the COCOM limits, so we could use civilian GPS for navigation. This was our launch box that we had on it.
Wow.
You had to bellow so you wouldn't have contact until it got over a certain altitude, bellow switches. So it couldn't inadvertently fire on us and blow us up. We had 4 ground stations to triangulate and tracking this stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Well, we did all this out of a shoestring budget, basically. Oh, that's the
Starfish Prime.
That's the Starfish Prime right there. By the way, that was launched from a Redstone rocket, which is developed here in Huntsville, Alabama area too, at Redstone Arsenal. So just give people an idea. These are the kind of things we're capable of. I led this stuff. I was in charge of these programs. This is what I was doing 20 years ago on the side. I had a day job. I was in space station work during the day, and at night I was building rockets. So,
but it just goes to show you. I mean, it was somebody with the resources of a nation state, even if it's a small nation state. What do you think they could build?
That is my point right there. That is the point.
I mean,
we
even
had
states you don't really think about.
Limited resources, limited time, just a handful of guys working part-time on a shoestring budget, and we were doing what used to take a superpower to do.
Right.
That was a major accomplishment. So that really told me a lot about technological proliferation and what was possible. So that tells me that we have vulnerabilities here that a lot of people just can't appreciate.
Absolutely.
I know how to send devices up. I mean, if I had one of the nukes, I could definitely put it in position.
Right.
I developed that technology 20 years ago. The technology and the operational techniques on how to develop them, I was
Yeah,
doing that kind of stuff. I just did it for that end and purpose.
Well, and what people didn't realize the whole time that back in 2017, when everybody was worried about North Korea, you know, you have these experts, even nuclear experts, saying, well, you know, they have a missile, but they don't have the proper skin for reentry, and they can't be very accurate. And with an electromagnetic pulse in the atmosphere, they don't need either of those.
Bingo.
And a lot of their tests were they would go up and they would blow up at about the correct altitude for an EMP blast. And everybody kept saying, oh, well, that's a mistake. It just went up and blew up. Well, I mean,
yeah, they want you to think it was a mistake.
That's right. That was the target, people. I mean, and especially with North Korea, it is in there. And he even during that time, Kim Jong-il referenced EMP several times. So they have the technology.
Yes, they do, because that was another thing the Soviet generals told us. They told us that they gave the technology to the North Koreans. They told us that. So we know North Korea has technology. So when you look at that, when you look at, you know, what it could be done from a Changchun gang type ship, absolutely you could launch this kind of stuff. I mean, I've done it. I've been out there launching stuff. I've launched rockets.
Right.
I've launched balloons. I've done it in the ocean. I did it where I can make it rocket run. It's the ship run in such a way that I knew how the winds of aloft would go, so I could actually have that balloon in any point in the sky I wanted it to. I mean, the exact coordinates for the time that balloon, that rocket should launch. And so, you know, all we had to do was change the running of the boat, because we knew how long it would take to inflate that balloon. And so I'd have, the winds aloft, we could map it all out so that when I was ready to launch that balloon, we would be at the point it would take for that balloon to get to a certain point in the sky. We've done that. And
that was 20 years ago, right? 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
I mean, wow.
So what could you do today? And we didn't have all the electronics. I mean, gosh mighty, cell phones have electronics, could do more than some things we were developing back then. We were doing from scratch. I mean, there's so much available to people today. So the scary thing is I know how to do that, but I also know how to penetrate the transformer stations and what the vulnerabilities to be. You know, that's nothing to brag about, but if I know it, you know, I'm not the only guy out here. There's tons of electrical engineers, and there's tons of people who are both electrical engineers and have been in the military, like myself, who understand operations and tactics and how to do things. So, and there's a lot of foreigners who, you go to any college in the United States of America, my dean of electrical engineering in the school I was at was Iranian. No, I don't think so. He's a really nice guy.
Right.
But you just don't know. You know, you get how many courses do we have in America? How many people are there?
Well, and we have a huge problem with the Chinese. The same problem. We have so many Chinese students, and I'm glad they finally are addressing this. It's not, and it's the Chinese Communist Party. It's not the Chinese people, but
bingo.
But, you know, they have agents here. I mean, they've infiltrated our universities and our labs and our whole education system. I mean, they stole our plans. An engineer stole our plans to our current stealth fighter and passed it on to them. And I believe that's how they developed their J-21. I mean, they have infiltrated our entire system. And but yet they've tightly controlled how anybody with any commerce in their system could have access. I mean, because we're a free country, they have unfettered access in a lot of ways that we would never have there. We're forced to give them our technology. And, you know, corporations really just in the last 20 years have been willing to do just about anything to get at the Chinese market. And that's why we've had the problems we've had with them. We're wide open to them. And I'm glad that the current administration has finally seen that, because if we wait 10 years down the road to address these things, it'll be too late.
Oh, yeah. Hey, I did note in your trailer, you showed the DF-21.
Yes.
I just mentioned that in the video I had. In fact,
yes.
My videos, I talked about the DF-21, the DF-26.
Yeah. And we talk about the hot spots. I mean, because that's part of the problem, is that it only takes them deciding to invade Taiwan, or it only takes Kim Jong-il to have a bad year and his whole country's about to fall down. Well, then that's when they strike out. That's when any of these countries strike out.
That's where China is right now. So
right.
Here's what I'm saying, David. Here's why I'm concerned. China has had floods going on for months, both the
Yep.
Yangtze River and the Yellow River. The Yangtze River Valley produces 40% of the food in China, 40%.
Yep.
The Yellow River Valley produces another good chunk. Both have been severely flooded. They're having locusts coming in the country, and they're having summer snows in some of their western districts, which is unheard of. And they've even had a couple of little snowfalls in Beijing of all places. So,
Wow.
well,
Well, that's why they bought some of our agriculture products. We were thinking it was because they wanted to trade. No, it's because they actually needed them.
Well, they actually bought record amounts before all this stuff started. They
Right.
had a record purchase before the bug that's running around got out.
Don't even go into that.
We can, I don't want. That's why I'm being real cryptic in how I'm saying this, because talking on this platform,
Yes.
is such that
You have to be careful.
My analogy to it is it's like walking on eggshells on thin ice during an earthquake.
Well, and a lot of the people I interviewed, it was even worse for them because almost all of them had classified clearance. And so they have a lot of what we call guilty knowledge because they know stuff that we'll never know. And they're telling us things that we should do things, but they can't make the argument using what they know a lot of times.
I'm aware of that, and I know.
And that's why we need to listen to a lot of them because and realize where they're coming from and what they know.
Yeah, well, some of this stuff should be declassified just so that
Absolutely.
we can find out.
Absolutely.
And that's another way that the system is making an error. It's just like what I just quoted with the number on the EMP superweapons. That was previously classified, but it's in the public record. Once something's in public record, it's wide open. Now, I think if you go back and look, that they may have excised that in some versions, but it did get out.
Right.
So it's been out there, and it's a scary number to think about. And a lot of there are a lot of systems out there being sold that people think are going to protect their home, and
they're not. Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the scariest numbers because most people in Congress and most people even in government believe that our strategic systems will be protected if we get hit first by an EMP. But if we get hit by a super EMP, they won't be.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to protect the Milhard standard installations.
Right.
Not adequately. And
Yeah.
so how in the world some chintzy little device with wires on it no bigger than a speaker wire or something like that going to protect your home? and some of these products claim they will protect your home for up to 40 EMPs. You won't cover it for one, buddy, but the world's gonna be fried, so nobody's gonna come after you and sue you.
Right.
So
it's crazy what people claim. For sure.
Yeah, well, we had tests in the laboratory. Yeah, they had testing for a certain spectrum of things. They didn't really shake it and bake it.
Crazy.
I'm thinking I may for a video buy one and just get me a car battery and fry the crap out of it.
Oh yeah, you can see how many volts it takes to fry it.
Well, these things work by voltage division. I'm an electrical engineer. Let me explain that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So,
you're the man to do that. I mean, because people don't understand that at all. And I mean, even from a coronal mass ejection from the sun, they estimated that. And they had data because by 1921 for the railroad event, and this is another thing we cover, they had data that proved that on the telegraph lines, it was 19 kilovolts per meter just from a solar storm.
Yeah.
And they even said that was almost Carrington event. It's hard to say because Carrington, we didn't have, there was no measurement really. They didn't really know what was happening. They just observed it and then kind of figured out what was happening. Whereas here we knew what it was and we were able to measure. And Dr. Jeffrey, I can't remember his last name, but he went back. He's a Harvard professor and a Dr. Jeffrey Love. And he went back and reconstructed all the accounts and everything else and showed that was how bad the 1921 storm was. And the problem is, even then, we didn't have nearly the electronics or the reliance on electricity that we have today. Everything relies on electricity, and therein lies the problem. Uh-oh, you look studious there.
Yeah, I'm trying to draw a diagram to kind of get this across in the simplest way I can think of in a hurry on a piece of paper.
Perfect.
That's a symbol for a battery, and this
Right.
is kind of a switch box.
Okay.
And it's got a wire going to ground, a protective wire, and that's your house, basically. Of course, all this is inside the house, but this is just
Right.
get the idea. So what a lot of these devices do is they sense a current coming through here, and they rapidly provide a shunt to ground. But that shunt for ground is only so big, and this is actually still connected. If you go to all the documents that talk about these things, they will tell you still have voltage division or current division. You're still going to get current going down this path too. Now, if this is to ground, it's lower. It is a lower resistance, so it's going to get more current. But you still have a lot of current going here. But when you got an event of the scale we're talking about, you're going to have enough current going there to fry your stuff anyway.
Oh yeah.
And something else that they don't talk about, and you and I have seen at the power stations, you know darn well that when they switch open, so there's so much stuff to talk about here. When I was in the military, they told us an EMP device, nothing connected is safe. To totally disconnect everything. Don't even have the wires or connectors anywhere close. You had to have one radio system totally disconnected in the Faraday cage because it could be fried easily. And so these guys, oh, we can protect your home just by this little box with chintzy little wires, and that this will totally work. And if these guys decide to sue me for saying this, I'm going to get them.
Well, you can take their box apart then, and you know.
I know a guy did that, and they actually threatened to sue him. Actually somebody you met too, but
yeah,
they threatened to sue him over that, and he kind of backed down. I won't back.
I think I heard that story. It's amazing what you hear when you start to run in the kind of these circles. You hear these little stories.
I know about this. I know about it firsthand. But I'm going to tell you what. I will get their things and have a lot of fun with them.
You should. That would be an interesting YouTube, is for you to run a YouTube video to run a couple of. All
right. Well, if they mess with me, that's what I'll do. Takes a little time. I got to spend a few bucks.
But yeah, I mean, you brought up a great point. I mean, that's one of the reasons. I mean, it's so difficult to edit the documentary because there's so many things that people need to actually know and understand just on a basic level to understand the problem. And there's so many threats, and there are it's so complicated to fix the grid because, the power grid, just like the internet, was never meant to be detected. And now you've basically merged the power grid and the internet, because without the internet, they can't run the power grid now.
Well, they do have an internal internet, but it's still vulnerable because.
But it doesn't matter.
Think about Stuxnet virus that took down reactors.
That was air gapped even.
That was off the main internet, but some guys got in there with memory sticks. They got in there with the little USB sticks. And somebody got in there with one that had the Stuxnet virus on it.
That's right.
And bam, off they went. So that's all.
That's easy to do. I mean, the security at these power facilities is nothing.
So if that could happen in Iran, who had high security, and it's not an open society,
right?
What would happen in our country?
To an underground facility. I mean, and we just talked about, I don't want to go into specifics about that, but it could easily happen.
So there's a lot we need to do to get our grid hardened, but it can be done. We have the technology, and if we can just have enough to keep basic essential systems running and keep the
transformers, the big transformers, the large transformers.
We want to save them.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to keep cooling water to the
nuclear plants.
And
absolutely.
It may be that you park a fuel barge right there next to the power plants, or you may have trains come in as backup generators because they have big electrical generators. There's several things you can do that aren't that hard. Having National Guard escorts for fuel convoys.
Right.
A fuel convoy is going to think about Mad Max movie. That's already happened in Venezuela. You've already had Mad Max get the fuel truck,
Yeah. And it's crazy though, because of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I mean, that's going to be difficult because anytime you do anything to a nuclear plant, it's so expensive, and it's so. I mean, they have so many rules and everything that that govern that for good reason, but to make sure in a situation where the power goes out and the pumps can't keep the cooled ponds, or the ponds where they keep the spent fuel cool, you know, they need to address that. And they also need to address, I don't know if you talked about this because we lost connection, but you know, the federal government actually, once a fuel rod is spent, they put it in the cooling pool for 5 years, correct? So they've got these huge pools with the spent fuel in there. So the government in their wisdom came in and they were putting them, they were supposed to do Yucca Mountain, so they would have a place to put the nuclear rods in dry storage. But when that never happened, they started storing all the nuclear rods in dry storage on location.
Right.
Now, that's fine, really, because they were safe. Like at Fukushima, they didn't have a problem with any of those. But then what the federal government did when they started getting the bill for the power companies to put the spent fuel in dry storage after 5 years, they made a rule that your spent fuel pool had to be totally full before you moved anything to dry storage.
And that's the problem. And by the way, all the fuel rods aren't spent, because fuel rods that are destined to go into the reactor are staged through the spent fuel rod pool. So there's some very hot fuel rods in those spent fuel rod pools too. But just sheet metal roof.
Yeah, a sheet metal roof. I mean, you know, they spend billions of dollars on the 4-foot thick concrete containment, and then they put all this, they put what, 5-10 times the radioactive waste next door in a shed. You know, it's crazy.
Everybody talks about the reactors and being afraid the reactors going off, and that's of concern. But I don't even talk about the reactors because everybody else focuses on it, and they neglect the spent fuel rod pools. They have more stuff in them.
Right.
More stuff in the spent fuel rod pools, and they're far more dangerous if the grid goes
Absolutely. Well, now, look at Fukushima. I mean, they didn't have any problems with the contained nuclear material.
Well, see, too, what people don't realize is that if the operators are really smart, and I said if, and if's a big 2-letter word, if they inject boron in real heavily in that reactor, as soon as they know that everything's gone down, they can stop that reactor, at least from the reaction process. You still got all the heat and the radioactive material in there. It still might melt them. At least you can stop the reaction. Yeah. Now, that didn't happen in Fukushima. It didn't happen in the instance we had, because they're always afraid they're going to wreck the plant. But it would save the country if they did it. So they need to really be prepared to inject that boron into those reactors.
Into 99 reactors.
Yeah, well, that's what they need to do.
99.
And then that can be done. They've got the stuff to do it. It's all there and ready to go. And the problem is they may not know what's just happened. They may think they're just having a storm and power got knocked out. They may not know. And they may lose power to control their systems before they even react properly. So that's the danger in the reactor. So we do need better intel available to them, so we can figure out what's happened so they can react properly. So that's part of what needs to be on the sensor side of what we got running. We have a very complicated country. A lot of people don't realize just how complicated all this stuff is. I cover a Bring Greg's is a homesteading channel and prepping. And this is an element of prepping. But a lot of people think, well, we should just shut the grid down. We'll all be fine. We'll like we used to. The problem is you can't, because you're going to get fried from the radiation.
Right. And you can't restart it. I mean, you can't just restart the grid, especially because you would have no communication. And to restart the grid, you have to have communication, because you don't just turn it on. It has to be balanced, and things have to start up in order, and you have to black start things, and you have to have power to even restart a nuclear power plant. So there are so many complicated problems to restarting the grid, which is what gets me why the power industry has gone to kind of, that's the plan, is restarting. And I just don't think that, you know, even for a CME, they talked about bringing the grid down for a period of time, because they would have, you know, anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour's notice if a bad CME was coming in. But, you know, by the time their planning would say that the president or the Department of Energy would have to make that decision. So now imagine the phone ringing, that coming in, and then them getting the information out to everybody in, say, if it was only 15 minutes to shut down the grid. I mean, it's just, and what is the procedure? I mean, it's just, there's so many things, and it's so complicated. The power grid's the most complicated machine that man has ever built.
And nobody's addressing it, and you're exactly right. The reason it's so complicated It's actually a multitude of grids.
Yeah,
Operated by a
absolutely.
multitude of companies. So you have
3,000 companies.
produce the power, and then you got tons of companies that distribute the power from the
Right.
producers, and they all have to work in concert together. Because here's the secret: the entire power grid produces at any and every instant in time the exact amount of energy that's being consumed.
Right.
That
That's
is
amazing.
that's amazing. I mean,
People are like, oh, where does it store? Like if they make it and we don't need it yet.
There is no
No, that's not
storage.
the way it works.
exactly. They produce exactly at
Which is
every
amazing.
time.
It's amazing.
And they coordinate this across
Yeah.
3,000 companies.
It's amazing.
A multitude of grids that are all interconnected, and it is absolutely amazing. You're exactly right. Of course, the more we modernize this and make it smarter, the more vulnerable we are. So how smart is a smart grid? How smart are your smart meters? And these
Absolutely.
are all, the more smartness you build into it, the easier it is to fry it. So,
Yep.
so
The dumber it gets when something happens. Yeah.
bingo, exactly. The smarter it is, the dumber it is when it loses its brain.
Well, it just makes us more vulnerable. And unfortunately, you know, our enemies know it and have it in their military plans again. And so it's just, yeah, we've built our whole country on something that Frank Gaffney, he had a name for it. I can't remember right off, but it was just like, it's like just a mess. I mean, it's amazing because a lot of the infrastructure for the power grid is 100 years old.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it's been just added on, and it's
ad hoc built. Your transformers are custom built for wherever they're at. The coils are hand wound, and all this has to work together in concert like a perfect machine. It's an orchestra.
it is. And I mean, it's amazing. It is amazing that you flip that you flip the switch and power comes on, because I mean, and the power companies do an amazing job providing us with cheap power and resilient power, but unfortunately they just haven't addressed the biggest threat. And I think and honestly, I think it's because it's just too overwhelming for them. I think that they just melt when they try to think of all of it, because they really, not only are they, when they're fighting the cyber threat, the EMP threat and the physical threat are different. You have to do different things to the grid. Cyber is totally removed from EMP. So right now they're spending all their money on cyber.
Yeah, they
and
are
we just
doing
did
cyber. And they are covering that as best as they can.
Yeah, but it's never going to be covered. I mean, and I'll tell you something
you're always going to have holes in that.
Well, and they don't understand the threat from cyber even. I just interviewed George Cotter, who was the former technical lead for the NSA. And he shared with me that, you know, because I asked Jim Robb, the head of NERC, about the threat from cyber. And he said, well, you know, they could never take down the national grid with cyber because it's so contained and there's so many different systems and everything. And so I was like, well, maybe he's got a point, but then I go talk to the former technical lead of the NSA, and they say, well, they just don't understand the threat.
Yeah, has he talked to the Iranians yet?
Right. They just don't appreciate and understand the threat. They can think that. So that's the kind of thinking you have going on. But again, I think it's
dismissive cognitive dissonance that, we got this.
Yeah, dismissive. Well, low probability dismissive, but they're spending, think of how much money they're spending trying to protect the grid. I mean, just from cyber attacks. It's incredible.
Well, I believe I could take down the grid myself if I was so idiot to do that, but I would never do it because that's idiot.
Right.
And you know, there's several people out here that can do that in this country.
Yeah.
A lot of them aren't as magnanimous as I am.
Yeah. Well, and the bad thing is our enemy, you know, we have smart enemies, and they know that most of them know that our military is great and they could never take us on head to head militarily, but they could sure hit our infrastructure and hit our Achilles heel.
Here's how they do it. If a country wanted to attack this country, everybody said, well, we won't do it because we'll fire our ICBMs back at them. And if they take out our grid, we'll shoot them from the submarines. What they don't realize is this. When you get something that's more powerful than your installation hardening requirements, and again, you're going to have several of these hit, and you're going to have also direct ballistic attacks or by people going in with AK-47s or whatever. There's
Drones.
other ways to do that too, by the way.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you take an AK-47.
Well, there are suitcase EMP weapons, direct energy
There's
weapons.
EMP weapons. There's backpack nukes. There's
Right.
satellite fracture orbital bombardment. Scuds in the tub. There's
Right.
intercontinental ballistic missiles. There are so many ways to take down the grid with EMP, the ballistic attacks, direct kinetic attacks. I mean, with cyber. When you put all that together,
But that's something they never want to do. They never want to put it all together, which in real life would happen. It would be put all together. They just want to take one little piece of one little thing and then say it's low probability.
So if you're a military planner on the other side and you decide you want to hit the United States,
Right.
your first objective, your number one first objective is to take down the power grid. Our military bases run off the civilian power.
95%.
Yeah,
Yep.
95%. So when you take that down, plus you're overloading them with EMP devices that exceed their hardening standard. And believe you me, they will probably have those suitcase devices really close to those military bases with, people they've already get pre-positioned here in this country. So they're going to hit it every way they possibly can.
Yep.
So once they take down that stuff, how does this country communicate to respond? How does it respond? The guys even in silos, if their silo is working, missile silo, they can't launch without command. If their stuff is working, how's the communication network going to work? Will their stuff work?
Well, and even supply chain. I mean, if the bases that are protected, which are very few, very, very few strategic bases are protected from an EMP blast. Even if they were, if all the other bases are down, they have no supply. They have no food. They have no
Well, I'm thinking, that's the
support at all.
Immediate response. So right now I'm thinking, if you're the other side, you want to hit American, you don't want a whole lot of stuff coming at you. How do you minimize that so that they can't shoot back with their immediate response? I mean, if you got ICBMs, you could have them targeted and on their way here before they get to the point our radars would see them. Especially,
But with the Scud in the tub, they wouldn't even know who shot it, so you couldn't retaliate. And a cyber attack combined, you would not know who did it.
That would be true for the MP side. But if they want to take out our missile bases, I mean, the guys are going to be shaking their head first going, what happened? Where'd it come from? And while they're trying to figure that out, the stuff's on the way that would take them out completely.
Well, that's why our space-based defenses are so important, don't you think?
Exactly. Yes, I agree with that. I really truly, I wish we didn't have to have a standing army, and I wish that we didn't have to have all this stuff. But when it comes to defending our grid in our country, in the world we live in today, we have a very aggressive countries, a couple of countries out there who view us in less than favorable light right now, and they're at that point where their internal politics may go south in a hurry, given inadequate food, economic issues, and a lot of other things that's happening internally. And typically in a situation like that, a lot of people don't understand, especially in tyrannical government, they don't think like us.
Absolutely not.
Rational. See, everybody makes assumptions about these companies or countries based on rationality and Western thinking. They do not think like that at all. They don't trust us. They think that we would really hit them first. And two, they are only interested in maintaining the power they have. They don't even care about their own citizens. If they did, you wouldn't see some countries like the CCP making decisions to blow levees and dams at times that are not announced, because if they announced they were going to do it and the people knew the flood was coming and get out, then they'd have to pay the insurance cost.
Right.
That's just really strange. This is supposed to be a classless society, right.
It's amazing. I mean, and the thing is that China and Russia use, if they don't want to do something themselves, they just use North Korea and Iran as proxies.
Easily.
And they'll continue to do that.
So
they pass on technology that they want them to have.
Yeah, they could stare at one of them and make them do something while they're far removed at that point in time. So we might know or know that the Chinese and the Russians are gone or not anywhere near, say, Venezuela, for example.
Right.
I pick on that because I thought sometime back that would be the optimum place if somebody was going to launch at us right now. And then along comes this lady from Wisconsin who has this dream, a vision, that about EMP devices being launched from 2 missiles coming out from offshore from Venezuela and
Really?
creating an EMP blast.
How
Now,
weird.
she grew up on a farm. She works on a farm. She had no clue what an EMP was. So here she came up with a dream that saw EMP devices. She didn't know what it was until she started researching this dream and looking this stuff up. And it was like perfect tactical operation, you know, how you would do a sneak attack, which usually a lot of you military planners don't even think about this kind of stuff. But here's a lady who works milking cows who saw all this. I've had her on my channel. It's like,
Interesting.
wow, you saw what? You saw what? And she went into all the details. It's like, holy smoke. I mean, would you believe in that kind of stuff or not? That is just off the chart. How did she come up with that? Wow.
Yeah, very
I
strange.
go around to military planners and say, how would you stage something like this if you wanted to do it? And I don't want to get that answer from them. I already know that. So
Yeah.
she milks cows for a living, and she's got a market farm garden farm, and she has a YouTube channel, and it's a prepper gardening type YouTube channel.
Huh. Interesting.
And she saw this, and it's like, wow, the lady really has impressed me. I've got her involved in a little outfit I'm starting called the Future Freedom Foundation. Our motto is to don't tread on freedom.
It's a good motto. I like it.
And anybody wanting to join that, they can email me. Right now, I haven't set up the website. We're just starting the group. We've got people in various states around the country right now. But anybody wants to do that, they can email my old Space Society email right now. And I'll get the other site set up soon. HAL5Space@AOL.com. Put freedom in the subject line. I'm also starting a network of survival tribes, because you can't make it as a lone prepper. If you're interested in that, put tribe in the subject line. Now, some people put both, because some people are interested in both. So we're trying to organize to prep people to get ready, because if this does, in her dream, she saw that happen in this December. Given the events going on in the world today, that's plausible. I'm not going to say it's going to happen. Greg Allison not get on here and say, hey, we're going to
Right.
get it. And I'm not
But
saying
it's plausible.
I did not say that anything that we're talking about is absolutely going to happen.
But we need to be ready for it if it does happen, only because it could be a civilization-ending event, and we should be ready for that.
These are plausible,
to protect ourselves.
But there is one event that will happen sooner or later if we
And
don't.
that's a CME.
Bingo,
Yeah.
the sun will get us if we don't get ready, and we're not ready for that right now.
Yeah.
So we
Last one that hit was 1921. Bad, but we also had a solar storm in Quebec that took out the Quebec grid at about 89. And that got the power companies. That's the thing that started, that got their attention. And look at how long it took them to come up with standards that were even substandards, weren't even implemented as standards until I believe 2014, and they aren't scheduled to be put into the grid until 2026, I believe. And there's no protection. I mean, and again, when we interviewed Jim Robb, there's protection. We have procedures. Well, that's not going to protect the procedures. Will not protect the grid. And from an electromagnetic pulse from the sun is an EMP3. The pulse 3 is the same you would get from an HEMP. So it wouldn't take out small devices, but it would take out all those transformers we've been talking about.
So I work in avionics system safety on rocket systems.
Wow.
And we have an order of precedence for how to control hazards. And the first thing is to prevent it from design. Come up with a design that will not allow the hazard to happen in the first place. The second order is to design stops and other things to keep it from going to the full extent of what it could happen at. And you want, in some systems, you want to have redundancy. If you can have redundant systems where if one goes down, you got to back up to cover you, then you do that. Some places that don't make sense. So you build a design margin, you make things thicker. Like you can only have your nozzle on your rocket can only be, you only got one nozzle. It don't do any good to build another nozzle or a second nozzle. If you have two nozzles, then you have less reliability, because the higher the parts count, you get less reliability reliability is inversely proportional to parts count. So you got to play all these things together and figure out how to do these things. But design margin is you make the wall thicker, you know, so there's definitely, maybe you have in a wire to keep it from getting burned up, you know how much current it will carry. Well, you need design margin on top of that, make it thicker. Especially if you got to worry about an EMP, right? Go to your house and look at what's coming out of your junction box for that ground wire, that little copper wire that goes to the ground in case you get hit by lightning. It's good to carry a certain amount of current, but it's not good enough to carry what you'd get from the EMP super weapon.
Right.
And that's what some of these devices would rely on. I would say you better add some ferrite beads in there, but if you're thinking it's going to cover your house 42 times or even one time for a full-up event, you're dreaming.
No way.
Chances are these stuff's going to come in through your wires and burn your house down. I would say the best defense you can have is go off grid.
Right. Well, I mean, in the Carrington event and in the 1921 storm, the CME caused fires in train stations that were connected to the telegraph lines.
Right.
So, I mean, imagine what would happen today. We're all connected to the telegraph lines.
That's
to the power lines.
Yeah, that's why the 21 event was called the railroad event.
Right.
The Carrington event caused a lot of telegraph stations to catch on fire. And back
Right.
in those days, they weren't running wires through the walls like our houses today. They had a hole in the wall with the
It
insulator.
came straight in.
You know, it came straight in onto a table.
Yeah.
And back out the other side. It wasn't you didn't have all these wires running through all your walls and ceilings and floors like we do today. So.
Yeah. Well, you know,
I was going to make another point.
Okay.
Think about this with our power stations. You know, when they switch power, when they open a circuit, and where they got a high current, when they open that circuit, they have a breaker that throws like 30 feet, 20, 30 feet. And when they separate this thing, and you can see it open it up, what do you see? A lightning arc.
An arc,
Travel
yeah.
with it for like 20 feet maybe.
Oh my
How
God.
is having a little device switching this far apart going to have no? Because the dielectric withstanding voltage. I mean, the air can't handle it. The air will break down. You'll get a breakdown of the air, and the avalanche breakdown is what they call it, and it will jump. And you ever see a spark gap generator?
Yeah.
They're just like that. Pop, 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 pop. And you know that's why even the switch that's this far apart is going to jump. You know that's what
Right.
they call it in the Army. You know, there's no switch big enough to cover you.
Right.
But you can't just open it up and it's going to be okay. So
Well, and that's it. So,
their
and the
strategy is
thing,
to shut it to the ground, but you're still going to have voltage division. Some of it's going to jump.
absolutely. And I mean, with a HEMP or a nuclear EMP, I mean, so you have 3 pulses, and the second pulse we're the most protected against because it's the most akin to what we would, lightning. But I mean, even that would be so much more powerful than what we currently have in houses and breakers. I don't know that even from pulse 2,
Now the E2 is
that you would be
far
protected.
stronger than a regular lightning.
Right.
So yeah, you got to deal with the E1, E2, and E3 all together in the EMP.
Yeah.
So
that's the scary one. They're all scary, but that's the really scary one because it would also be combined with the cyber and everything else. And that's why they've been mapping the grid for years. So they'll know exactly what they need to hit and where and when and sequences and everything. They've been mapping the grid for probably almost 10 years now, the Chinese and the Russians. So they have a very good idea of what it would take.
And the Iranians and the
Right.
Koreans. I mean,
They don't have it to the same extent, but realize too, we talked about proxies before. If the Russians or the Chinese wanted something done, they just give them the information.
sleeper cells too. There's
Yeah.
sleeper cells, and
Yeah.
individual proxies that might walk in with a USB
Absolutely.
device. But I think here's something that we were told some time back, and it was
Right.
someone told the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard that you could take our grid down by taking out 9 critical substations. That's a number that's been kicked around here in the United States. A lot of us know this in our community. It's not widely known which 9 to hit, but
That's not widely known. I have seen a map though.
Yeah, you know what his reply was? He says 9. I've already got 20 targeted.
Right. And I mean, they know what the big ones are. They don't have to know the exact 9. And I talked to Jim Robb about that, and he
All
said
you got to do is look at the dead
it never happened.
graphs and see where the most wires are running. I mean,
Right.
where those high voltage transmission lines are running. You can see where the substations are.
Right.
It's like falling off a deck.
Well, they've mapped it through malware that they've had in our systems for years, and you know, I mean, so they know what's where.
Yeah, well, the malware tells them what's inside the building. It tells
Right.
them everything. So they've got a total breakdown of our system. That's the scary thing. They know where it's at and everything about it.
Well, and they've also got back doors because until I think 2014 or somewhere along in there, actually a lot of computer servers that are sitting and are still sitting on the IT side of system security came from China. So you've still got Chinese made servers.
Don't you want to connect everything together through Huawei and 5G so everything goes back
No,
to China?
thanks. Yeah, no. But you know, it's amazing that it took us this long to actually figure that out. I mean, you know, it's
just so sweet.
Yeah, but now it'll take 20 years for them to do anything about it.
Just ask the
if they
Uyghurs.
ever.
Yeah. The Uyghurs and the Falun Gong, how much they love the CCP. I mean, they're so great and wonderful. China, Taiwan just can't wait to be integrated.
Oh, yeah.
Hong Kong, right?
Well, and yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
If they were so wonderful, Taiwan and Hong Kong would be happy campers, but they're not.
Yeah. Well, Hong Kong's seeing now what happens when you put your trust in them.
The only people in the world that want a system like what the Chinese have is American college students.
That's not far from the truth. Unfortunately, our system has been infiltrated by a lot of far left thinkers.
Institutes and
it's dangerous.
Yeah, these are people that don't have the real world experiences, but they're teaching stuff based on theory, and they've lived in ivory towers all their life.
Correct.
The real world operates, and they develop a lot of theoretical what's wrong with the world stuff. And there are things wrong with the world, but they absolutely their solutions are not real fixes. Not in my opinion.
Well, they're usually not very logical. They're mostly emotional. So
well, that's just it. You've got to use logic to really get there. I mean, you know, people's heart matters, but you know, you can deal with the details of heart by looking at it from a logical standpoint. What actually works? How do you put together a system from the economical standpoint, from a technological standpoint, sociological standpoint that works? That's one of the reasons I love Dr. Peter Vincent-Price.
He's awesome.
Not only does he know the physics, the science, and the weapons systems, he's a weapons systems expert. He's a historian.
He knows the history. He told us some great stories about prior civilizations who were wiped out because of their reliance on technology. And that's a great part of the documentary, is him telling that story. I mean, it's just really, he's brilliant.
I love talking with him.
And you know what? I'll tell you something about a lot of these people like him who've been doing this for 20 years, and they're the real warriors in this battle. And they have given a lot. They have been ostracized. They have been removed from things, and you wouldn't believe how much they've given up to take this fight forward.
Quast should have been the head of the Space Command for Pete's sake.
Yeah, well, General Quast was forced to retire basically because he disagreed with them about Space Command from the Air Force. You know, he talked about it, and they didn't like that. So, and that was, you know, that was tragic because he's a brilliant man.
Amen. Amen. Well, he's actually involved in a lot of the space community today. The
good
advocacy community and the power grid. So
well, he'll probably get more done in the private sector anyway. So
he actually said that himself.
Yeah,
so, and that's probably true. But he's involved both in space advocacy for those who follow this my Galactic Griggs channel, and he's involved in the space defense systems and power grid systems. He covers a lot of area. General Stephen Quast is an amazing individual.
He is so smart.
There's another group that meets in the space advocacy side that's headed up by some of my friends that he's actually very much into. So kind of like the Secure the Grid teleconference. But so I won't go all into that, but because it's kind of it's probably about 100 of us that go to that teleconference from time to time. I'm not in that as frequently, but it's a very active group. So we have a lot of good stuff going on. The thing is, we could have a bright, brilliant future if we can just hold everything together, hold this ship together, and get through these things.
Right.
I do believe we've got to find ways to get outside of all the hatreds in the world today, because technological proliferation, eventually you're going to have weapons of mass destruction capacity in the hands of small groups. And
I
so how do
agree.
you survive when you've got that? We've got to learn different ways to live and work together. And that's where it comes from the heart, and we've got to learn to deal with matters of the heart. But
Yeah.
a lot of technical stuff that we just don't have right today that we've got to solve. Like I said, a lot of people on my green gig side, we're homesteaders. I got a homestead. I've got a worm farm. I got a market garden. That's what I do when I'm not doing rockets. But I do that too. I do missile defense. I have worked missile defense. I have worked space station. I am working on rockets right now, and I have worked on the fiery end and the sparky end too. So
Right.
I've
Well versed in the rockets. Yeah.
yeah, I'm a rocket man. So
That's cool.
And a worm farmer.
And a patriot.
When I was a kid, I built muzzle loaders.
Oh my gosh.
Camping out, and I'm all into wild edibles and wilderness stuff. I love the wilderness. So I'm kind of an odd individual.
Well, you got technologically you're sound, and you got your survival skills too. So you're good at both ends, because that's the biggest problem, or another problem we have, is we're losing that. All of our generations now, when we grew up, and people our age, we at least knew how to build a garden and had some skills that were outside of looking at a phone pretty much. And we've lost that. I mean, we've lost a lot of the things that we know to survive, that we used to know how to survive without technology. I mean, it used to be that 75% of people produced our food. Now 2% produce it. So we've become so specialized.
If you go on that farm today, the modern farm, they are dependent on tractors, and a lot of these big tractors use software.
Right.
And they'll use fuel. They're going to have to power grid just to get the fuel pump to get it to them. They use a lot of chemicals to grow this stuff. All that will be unavailable. These tractors will not be able to run. They're planting seed that are genetic modified seed that they have to get from the vendor, from whoever, Bayer, who bought Monsanto out, however they have that arrangement set up. They're not even allowed by their contracts to save the seed. And if they did, a lot of it's hybrid seed. It won't even grow back the same plant. So these farmers are completely reliant on a ginormous distributed system that's very complex, that when it goes down, they won't be able to grow the food they're growing today. You look in the poultry houses, the chicken houses, the turkey houses, the hen layer houses, they use vast amounts of electricity to operate those systems. Power goes down, all these birds die.
Not to mention our distribution system, our just-in-time food system. Everything's just in time. Look at what happened in the pandemic with our delivery systems.
Oh yeah, exactly. A lot of food was thrown away. They can keep some of this stuff alive as long as their backup generators run, but when they run out of fuel, when you can't pump the fuel and when the trucks can't even take the fuel to the fuel station, gas stations, truck stops, all these things are going to start compounding and cascading when it takes a lot of spare parts and maintenance to keep the trucks running. When you don't have you can't go to the parts store, you get those parts when the mechanics places aren't operating because they have a lot of power tools. Things are just going to start shattering and fraying apart. That's the supply chain. It will absolutely vanish. And so these farmers are not going to be able to operate. And what's funny, what I've noticed, and I've done a video on this, when you go around the farms, most farmers are not gardening. Or if they do, they got a little bitty garden. I went through driving around the farms doing a video which said, no farm, no garden, no garden, no garden, no garden, no garden. And I would drive a long distance before I'd find a garden. It's like, oh, they got a garden, yay! No garden, no garden, no garden, no garden, no garden. Just through the farm community stuff. I've done it here in my area here in Georgia, and very rural, huge agriculture area in South Georgia. I've been around these different areas just driving around. And I've even looked on Google Earth and looked down, and you don't see the garden patches. It's like, wow, I think it's like maybe 8%. No, it's not even that. About 1 in 8 might have a garden, and a lot of them aren't sufficient. But here's the other thing: most people garden buying fertilizers and pesticides and all this stuff, which you got to go to the store to buy. So what I teach on my Green Greg's channel is how to garden, how to build up your beds using compost, worm products, and things like that. You don't
Right.
have to go to the store. That's the way I teach it. And I also, in my Green Greg's channel, talk about wild edibles, wild medicinals. Basically, I'm trying to get everybody to the point where they can survive, thrive, and
That's
stay
good.
alive, no matter what happens, whether our society keeps up and stays operating, or
Right.
everything crashes and falls down. That's important. We need to be prepared either way, because we live in a time of giant uncertainty.
We do.
We just don't know what's going to happen. We have external forces of other countries. We have internal strife. We have the sun will get us eventually if we don't do something. The sun will absolutely take us down if we don't do something. So,
Well, I mean, and like, so when we interviewed former CIA director Woolsey, I mean, he said it's the most dangerous time that we've ever lived in because of that uncertainty, and because there isn't the balance that there used to be, even between us and the Russians. I mean, the nuclear umbrella, I mean, nobody liked that, but at least we prepared for that. Look at duck and cover and all that. Now nobody thinks about it. After the Cold War ended, everybody just said, "Up, everything's okay now." And then we went through the little period of terrorism, and we focused so much on terrorism that we forgot that we still have competition and strategic challenges like China and Russia out there. And so now we're shifting back to that. And
yeah,
interesting to see.
it is unfortunate. I hope that the people in these countries where they have tyrannies running their countries will see the light and somehow get rid of those governments that are tyrannous over them, get the jack bit off their neck. It's not easily done, and some of them don't really have the culture for that yet, but I hope they find the way to get there, because a lot of these countries could do enormous positive things if they
Oh,
did
yeah.
on top of them. There are good people in every country, every creed,
Absolutely.
culture, every religion, live in every hamlet, any race, color, whatever. You will find people with good hearts, smart people, and people that work hard.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
it's the powers that be that.
It's the governments.
Bingo, exactly. And I say that to the cows come
It's the
home.
governments. I mean, it's like, it's not the Chinese people, it's the Chinese Communist Party.
Bingo, exactly.
It's not the Iranian people, it's the crazy mullahs, you know, that are so far. I mean, you know, I have no problem with Muslims and Muslim religion, but it's the extremists that are causing the problems, and they're Christian extremists that cause problems.
Right.
There are all kinds of extremists, and those are the ones who are the problems.
We have had some of the best people I know in Muslim. They've got one of the closest.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a Greek restaurant, but it's run by a Persian guy. You know, Persians,
Yeah.
Iranians. Okay, some people
Yeah.
connect the two.
Yeah.
But he is the sweetest guy you'd ever meet in your life. He just,
Yeah. They're great people.
And my neighbor is Algerian, and he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
I got a beekeeper that comes to my place he's from Qatar, Qatar. How you say that? Qatar. No, he's from Qatar. So you know, I don't know people. I have worked. I've had bosses and professors from the Mideast. I had a Cuban mate from the Mideast. You know, so I have worked and dealt with these people for decades.
Right.
It's not the individuals.
No.
It's the organizations, the governments, and organizations. There's organizations that cause trouble too, because there's power in pitting people against each other. There's power in saying it's their fault. It's their fault. If you support me, we'll get together and we'll fight them or fight them. And
they make us fight each other while they run everything, which is why everybody hates what's going on in Washington right now, because they can't play that little game anymore, you know?
And you know, and there's the deep state that seems to be arrayed against us all, and global.
Yeah.
But you know what a lot of people don't now, what would surprise some people is that you still have good people in all these agencies. And every now and then one makes it all the way to the top, but they usually blackball once they realize this guy has either woken up or wasn't one of them to start with.
Well, I mean, the problem with government is, I mean, you know, I don't think the founders of government ever visualized people making a career out of politics. You come and you serve 1 or 2 sessions, and then you go back to your job.
That is,
you know, and you do what you do in life, and it's a service. It's not you come in and you're poor and you leave and you're a multimillionaire, you know, or shortly thereafter.
They saw citizen representatives.
Right.
Yeah, and they had that originally. Look, but some of them were famous. Look, Davy Crockett, he was very much a citizen.
Absolutely.
He's famous, but you know, hey, he went out and he was a soldier and he gave his life, you know, for the things he believed in. And that it was Texas. But he was out there. He had his sleeves rolled up. He was a frontiersman. He was out there in the frontier, and you had a lot of people like that. Of course, we even had a president who was pretty much like that, and Andrew Jackson. He's definitely a frontiersman. I mean, he'd been a general, but he was definitely a frontier sort of guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we need to get back to. We need to get back to a government that represents the people. And that's what I'm hoping to do with Freedom Restoration Foundation. So I mentioned, people interested in that can email me at hal5space@aol.com. I'll put a link below if you're going to do survival tribes or join that group. And at the bottom of the notes will be some stuff for what you can do for the grid. And you might have to scroll through a few notes to find that. But I'll put some contact information on here. And I'll put a link to your trailer, David.
Okay. Yeah, and a link to our website. It's just theblackskyevent.com. And you can go there and learn. It's the Black Sky Event. So, we're just trying to get the word out.
All right. So you are still developing this documentary.
Correct.
Is there anything anybody can do to help you? I mean, it's an expensive thing to put together a documentary. What would you like to see? Could anybody help you?
Well, I mean, just really get on social media. I mean, we're on Facebook and we're on Twitter, and you can come to our website at theblackskyevent.com and get connected to those things and get involved and be involved and give us feedback on, I mean, we're putting articles out and stuff and talking to people and getting a community together so we can support some of these great organizations that are already out there, like Secure the Grid, and people who are trying to actually get something done and trying to get our government to move forward to build a resilient, or not the government, it's the private sector, because the government doesn't own the grid. The private sector does. But, we can make a difference and we can make the grid more resilient. And that's what we're trying to do. And just raise awareness so that people actually care. I mean, I start talking to a lot of people about this, and what we've tried to do is make a very complex and issue in so many levels understandable, because it's a hard thing to take in, and so we just want to raise awareness. And so anybody that can come in and support us, and then of course once we have the film out, buy the film, get it out there, share it with people,
distribute the film, get it out and about.
Yeah.
Get on some network with this film.
Yeah. Well, we're looking at, of course, all the streaming networks, and we got delayed because of COVID, because we had some interviews that we were trying to do that we couldn't do because the individuals we wanted to interview weren't open to it at the time. And so we've only got a couple more interviews to do now, but we've been editing all this time. We've taken advantage of it. So we hope to have it out by year's end. That's what we're shooting for, if not before.
Get it out before December.
Yeah. Well, if it's December, I don't think anybody wants to listen to this during Christmas, so we may wait till after the first of the year then.
Well,
although it would make a great stocking stuffer, right, for the prepper who has everything, or
I was thinking Stacy Savicki's dream, but if that happens, we're too late.
Yeah, the sooner the better, because government moves at such a slow pace, and the power industry, I mean, it just takes them forever to do anything. And usually the things that they're doing, or the things that they've currently regulated to be put in the power grid now to protect us, aren't really going to protect us once they have them in. And that's just, they just won't make the commitment to protect us.
Bingo. Well, we have an old adage we tease about called the speed of government.
Yes.
It happens at the speed
snail.
Of government. Yeah, which is slower than a snail typically.
They have to do more studies of the study of the study of the study.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
And let's have a meeting to talk about.
Right.
We're going to set up a meeting to plan meetings.
Right. We've all got to keep our jobs, and we've got to support the intellectual base of our universities to produce more studies, and all these think tanks just produce more studies and study it and study it. Yeah. That's the thing about the grid. I mean, especially the EMP threat. I mean, the military has already done all this. Now, they didn't declassify it all, but they declassified enough of it. And the people on the EMP Commission were the ones that were actually there, and they saw the Starfish prime test, and they knew about this, and they actually hardened a lot of the grid for the military. And they still can't talk about some of that, but we should listen to them about how to fix it, because they know. They're the ones that know.
So other things to bear in mind is go see my video that I did with Ambassador Hank Cooper, because he talks about how he got the Carolinas to harden their grid. And this is something a lot of you can do by working directly with your EMA people, your emergency providers, talking to them, get to your National Guard if you can, especially when you get to your Adjutant General. That may be hard for a lot of people to do, but you can start working with your local EMA people, and eventually you can work it up to the state level. And I did that, and I got to my state EMA director. So these are all things that you as individuals can do. You can write letters to your congressman and say, hey, we got laws in the book. Let's make the companies do these things. But one of the other things that we're aware of that could be done is if we could get money, and they're always passing these ginormous trillion-dollar infrastructure bills. If we get just a piece of that set aside for hardening the grid, then that would make it easier for the companies to swallow. Because what happens is the companies can't raise their rates because the PSCs, public services don't want to give them the authority to do it, because then they got to answer to the people that voted for them. And so you get kind of a spiral that's kind of hard to get it through. So if they had some other revenue to make some of that happen, it might make it easier. I mean, we spend trillions and trillions of dollars on defense, but our most vulnerable thing, we spend nothing on. This is our Achilles heel. This is the most vulnerable thing going on in our country today. If we do anything, we need to harden the grid. If we don't do anything else, we need to harden the grid.
Very well said.
Oh, well. Well, I hope I didn't talk too much, David.
No, you were great. Thanks. I appreciate you having me on. Thanks. It was great to talk to you and see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. So
yeah, it's been
I have to head back over to Huntsville and visit again. So great place. Beautiful city.
And I'm sure we could find some other things to entertain some of your other documentaries and programs you're doing.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
Huntsville's an interesting place, if anything else, right?
Yeah, it's very cool. It's a neat place. A lot of smart people in Huntsville, that's for sure.
We have more PhDs per capita and more engineers per capita than any place.
Yeah.
You can't throw a rock.
It's amazing.
Without hitting 2 or 3 of us.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's great. Well, I really appreciate you having me on, Greg. Thank you so much.
All right, well, hang on for a second when I end the program. I just want to tell everyone, subscribe to my channels, the Galactic Gregs and Green Gregs. We're going to have a lot more videos to come that will be very interesting on power grid defense and many other things. So on Galactic Greg's side, a lot more about what we can do in space. I'm going to do some videos on just some of the basics, because there's tons of channels out there explaining rockets and what's going on with them. And here's the latest feature on, say, a Starship, or the spaceship, in case it's Virgin Galactic, which I happen to know that system pretty intimately. Having developed air-launched hybrid rockets, a lot of my guys worked on that, by the way. And at one time, I hired George Whiteside to be executive director of the National Space Society. So, yeah, I got a little inside scoop on that system. And of course, there's a lot of stuff out there. I'll be covering a lot of videos on these. Oh, I know a little bit about the space launch system, Artemis. Space station, ISS, the robotic systems on the space station. Yeah, I know that stuff. The power systems in the ISS. Yep. Been there, done that. But on Green Greg's side, my proposition is to help you survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. And right now, we're highly challenged in these regards, all the things coming at us. Our society has got threats coming at us from every direction. It's kind of like you're sitting on a railroad track, but there's not one train coming at you, they're coming at you from every direction. And so you can't tell what's the end of the tunnel and what's the train. So we've got to really, I tell people on my channel, they got to keep their eyes wide open and head on the swivel more than ever right now. So that's what we're trying to do. And let's hope and pray that nothing happens until we can get this grid hardened, that we can get it done, and this country survives and is prosperous, and we can get through all this strife that we're dealing with right now and find peaceful ways to deal internationally. We got a lot of challenges ahead of us. It don't mean it can't be done. And I haven't said that any of these things will absolutely happen, except the sun will do something if we don't get the grid hardened eventually. It could happen tomorrow morning, or it might be 20, 30, 40 years from now. But we're overdue. Anyway.
Definitely.
Let's hope that we stay overdue for a long time.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
I'm good with that too, David. But I appreciate what you're doing. You're a patriot, because what you're doing is you're trying to get the word out there to wake people up. People can't take action until they realize they got a problem. So you got to wake people up first, and that is what you're doing. So I salute you, sir, for your effort.
Thank you.
I know there are things that you can be doing that's far more profitable than this. And some people bang on me because, occasionally I talk, I give a commercial or something. It's like, gee, if I want to make money on YouTube, I would do videos. Hey, I've got
Right.
rabbits, I've got cats. Go to the channel. We'll see 19 million views for a video called Rabbit Waking Up to the Sound of a Banana.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Well-
crazy. I mean,
Well,
it's-
people don't realize how much time and money and effort goes into these things. And I mean, you've got to make your revenue back somehow just to break even, because it's expensive
it is.
and time consuming.
It's very time consuming. It takes away from other things that are important.
Absolutely.
But the people need to know this stuff. It's got
They
to
do.
get out there. It's got to get out there. And so again, I appreciate everything you've done. You're awesome.
Well, thank you, Greg.
End the recording here. So everybody on Galactic Gregs and Green Gregs, I really want to thank you for watching. So that I'll know that you've watched it this far. Say, hey, Greg, it takes a lot of coffee to stay with you this long. And I'll know you got this. So I always tell them something like that.
That's
Just
great.
as a test of
I like that. I have to remember that trick.
And that's kind of a trick to get people. They know I do that, so they'll hang on maybe. Anyway, everyone, again, I just got to say thank you for high voltage transformers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the ones that can send up to 700,000 volts out.